the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, Robert Scott Bell.
Continuing now with our ongoing Man in the Health Freedom Expo Street. It's a man. He's a Superman in my mind. Jeffrey Smith is back on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Jeffrey, my man, so good to see you.
I'm very glad to be here. I just flew in.
Yes.
From
where? Where were you?
Connecticut.
Connecticut.
And Connecticut and California are like looming large on the GMO horizon. Connecticut has a bill before the House and Senate for labeling GMOs. And California has a ballot initiative where signatures are being gathered as we speak all around us for a ballot initiative for labeling. So the contest is on. Will it be Connecticut?
Or California.
Exactly.
Well, the C words in this time are very positive. Connecticut, California. Who's going to do it? And we'd love to see it because certainly if California does it, you talk about labeling in school textbooks. If California says this needs to be in textbook, suddenly the whole country has to do it because they can't print up separate. So I'm imagining even Connecticut, which is decently populous, it would have an impact on the entire country. It would start rolling dominoes, perhaps.
Well, think about it. Let's say you're selling food for craft foods, and you've already removed all genetically modified ingredients from their European brands and their Japanese brands, and now you find out that you have to label it in the United States, and 53% of Americans say they would avoid GMOs if labeled. What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to remove GMOs because you're not going to lose any customers by doing so. No one wakes up in the morning desiring their daily dose of Roundup-laden food or food which is the herbicide that's sprayed on Roundup-ready crops that are genetically engineered, or the pesticide-producing corn. No one looks for their Bt toxin designed to break open the stomach of insects and kill them and figure that maybe the EPA has it right this time and that maybe it won't hurt them.
Right. Well, and there's the argument that a large federal bureaucracy is not likely to respond to the people, more likely to respond to those who could lobby it into special privileges, if you will, or exemptions or exceptions to the rule. That if we could go down like here, the state level, why I'm working a lot with the 10th Amendment Center, the idea of using the 10th Amendment against the feds when they violate state and personal rights, we have remedy under the Constitution, even if they ignore it. So this is all tied into that. Yes. Absolutely tied into that.
And it's interesting, in Connecticut, I've always sort of shied clear of the political solution for GMOs because the tipping point of consumer rejection seems so much easier and less about going against the strength of Monsanto, because Monsanto's strength is in manipulating government, regulators, farmers, media, etc., but not about changing people's uneasiness with GMOs.
Changing their minds, yeah.
9 out of 10 Americans want it labeled. Most Americans would avoid it if labeled. But in Connecticut, I was giving a press conference at the State House, and I was introduced by Representative Roy, who introduced the bill, a 20-year veteran, and flanking us were the most conservative and the most liberal members of the Connecticut legislature in favor of the bill.
You're bringing left and right together again.
Republican, Democrat, conservative, Republican. Everyone says basically we have the right to know. Now, some people were into the message that we can't trust Monsanto because essentially, if you look at the FDA law, and I know you're aware of this, the policy says we don't have to evaluate GMOs whatsoever because Monsanto does it for us. And so the same company that told us that PCBs, Agent Orange, and DDT were safe can determine if your breakfast cereal is safe. And that is basically what the argument. It was interesting. I was on NPR in Connecticut last Thursday, and following me was a member of the Farm Bureau, and they receive a lot of money from Monsanto, so they obviously have to support whatever they say, and they're against labeling. And the big conclusion that this man had was, I trust the government, and we should trust the government. And if the government doesn't require labeling, we don't need it. But if you look at who in the government is looking out for us, again, the FDA says Monsanto will determine it for us. The USDA just said Monsanto can do its own environmental impact statements. And in fact, we're going to speed up the whole process so it can happen in half the time. The EPA ignores its own scientific advisors and just goes with whatever's written for them by the biotech industry. So if he's saying we trust the government, then by inference we're saying we have to trust Monsanto, who last week on Saturday was written up in the Wall Street Journal as having to spend yet another settlement, this time $93 million, to pay the people that they poisoned. In this case, it was Nitro, West Virginia, with Agent Orange.
Right, and $93 million to them would be like pulling a buck out of our pocket. honestly.
Hey, buddy, can you spare $100 million? Yeah.
And that's what we see with biotech and also big pharma. So that the wholeness that was made through the courts, of course, is not even close to the compensation needed to, that's affecting the entire population of the planet at this point.
And then it becomes a motivation to continue that behavior.
For sure.
Because as long as you can make more money by hurting people, knowing that your remedy is going to cost you less than the profit that you make, then the system is promoting that type of behavior.
Yeah. What kind of movement on in awareness of divesting? Mike Adams wrote recently about divesting of certain things like the pharmaceutical stocks, et cetera, biotech as well. Has there been any traction on that? Because you look at profitability in a weak economy, and people are going, "Gosh, I got to make money somewhere," and they kind of park their moral compass, ethical compass, and say, "Well, I'm still going to hold the stock."
I haven't seen any movement, but I don't really look in that field. But I am talking to more and more people who are investors and investment analysts, and they actually are asking me for information about Monsanto and their future. And I think there is a sense that investors are nervous. They're looking at what's happening in the United States. And I think what's happening in the United States is that the message about the health dangers, which is getting stronger, and I want to talk about that in a minute, because some of the information I have is actually shocking for those that aren't. It was shocking to me in some cases. That it's starting to gather a strength and a momentum and a critical mass, and that is now reaching an expression in the move for labeling. So there's been 19 different states that have had labeling bills, plus California has the ballot initiative, which may have the best chance of passing.
Right.
And that's an expression of this non-GMO revolution which is occurring. So I think that's going to be reflected in the wise and studious investors as they look at what's happening.
So what's the shocking information that even shocked you? I mean, it takes a lot to shock Jeffrey Smith here.
Well, what's shocking to me is just how immediate the change is in both the behavior and health of animals when switched from GM to non-GM.
Okay.
I mean, I'm talking about 2 days, 3 days, where everything changes. The behavior changes. The health starts to change. There's a person I met at one of the 5 farm conferences I spoke at this year so far, and he said that he was called by one of his clients, and the guy was so nervous, and he was stammering, and he said, "I got to tell you, you told me to switch to non-GMO corn," and he was running a pig operation with thousands of pigs, and he runs the nursery. And after 3 days, we saw a change, but we just joked, and my brother and I said, well, maybe it's the non-GMO corn. By day 11, he called this guy and was absolutely shaking. He said, the health is dramatically improved. The behavior is dramatically improved. They don't lie down all the day. They play like little piglets. They're like it was 14 years ago when we switched to GM corn. Before that, they acted like pigs. After that, they were sick, and their behavior was bad. And the thing is, 14 years ago, they were also introducing these CAFOs, these factory farms, and they blamed it on that. So they didn't know it was the GMO until they switched to non-GMO. Yeah. Then here's some of the shocking ones. A guy told me at the same conference, his friend had miniature cattle, 36 inches high. They switched to GM corn because he ran out of the non-GM.
Yeah.
90% of his herd died within 2 weeks.
90% in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Did this make news anywhere?
No, of course not. Now, the thing is, I immediately responded, and this was brought up in the meeting, and I said, it's interesting. In India, they allow animals to graze on cotton plants after harvest, and I was visiting one village where 13 buffalo, all the buffalo of this one village, had been eating, without a problem, regular cotton plants after harvest. They grazed on GM cotton plants designed to produce the Bt toxin, and they died within 3 days after a single day of grazing. And there was another study done where 100% death rate among the sheep that were fed the GM cotton plants compared to 0 symptoms on the other side. I talked to people. They talk about the behavior change in animals that have been fed GMOs. They end up antisocial, aggressive, agitated constantly. I've had veterinarians and farmers say that the animals look happier when they switch to non-GMO. And there was a scientist, Dr. Don Huber, who was speaking about the behavioral changes and the physiological changes in the gut in animals that have been fed GMOs, and a guy came up to him afterwards and he said, I'm a physician. I've spent my entire career working on autistic kids, and what you're describing is what we're seeing in the autistic kids.
Behavioral changes, health changes, in gut intestinal changes. We've had enough as I've been witnessing this for, ever since I got into homeopathic medicine, these declines. But the acceleration that you're describing, the damage you're describing is as horrific as the things I've been dealing with for so many years. You're just taking it to whole new levels that I'd rather not hear about, of course, but we've got to let loose on this because this information is just vitally important if we're going to salvage the next generations coming up, much less the animals.
And I'll tell you, there's some new research that when you put it together, it's kind of scary, and I'm going to do that for you, but I'm going to give you we have to end on a good note, okay?
Yes, of course. We always do. We always do.
So the reason why Bt toxin, which is designed to break open the stomach of insects and kill them, is in our corn supply and in our cotton is because the EPA and the biotech industry claims that it only will operate on insect cells and not human cells. Mm-hmm. A study came out a week and a half ago, Journal of Applied Toxicology, that showed that it works similarly or the same on human cells. It breaks open the membranes and causes them to leak. So that means that it might be causing the permeable gut, which is now what many, many researchers think are linked to autism and inflammation, autoimmune diseases, and all that stuff.
The very thing here at the Health Freedom Expo, I'm arguing, we've got to repair that. If anything, now you're adding to the insult and the assault. The posters we have here talking about that. If we don't have the,
but it gets a little worse. It gets a little worse because in a study done last year in Canada, they found that 93% of pregnant women had Bt toxin in their blood, and 80% of their unborn fetuses. How did they have it so that it was so frequently produced in, or in their diet that they could have it 93% of the time? Well, it turns out the only human feeding study ever published showed that genes can transfer from soybeans into the DNA of our gut bacteria and may continue to function. So if the Bt gene transfers from basically corn chips into our gut bacteria and turns them into living pesticide factories, and it produces continuously and it gets into our blood, and that gets into the blood of our unborn fetuses, and it breaks open the membranes of the human cells. Now we look at what's happening with the canaries in the kitchen, which in our generation is the kids.
Yes.
The canary in the coal mine, this is the canary in the kitchen. We are seeing unbelievable incidents of behavioral and physiological damage. And if they're getting this onslaught of this dangerous Bt toxin on a continuous basis from the time of conception, that might explain a lot. In fact, I'm speaking today on a panel with Dr. Michelle Perro, a pediatrician, who says what she's seeing is unprecedented in the health of kids, and she believes that GMOs is a major culprit.
Liam Sheff, welcome back to the show here. Glad you're with me.
What are you guys talking about? This is science fiction, right?
Oh, absolutely. Here's science fiction, right? They take spider genes, put it into goats to try and milk the goat to get spiderweb protein to make bulletproof vests. That's true.
Yeah.
Now, how about this? They want to release in our Florida Keys genetically modified mosquitoes, and they promise that they'll all create sterile offspring, except 3%, unless they're in except in the presence of tetracycline. Then it goes to 15%.
3% of hundreds of millions of mosquitoes.
It shouldn't really bother you, though, really.
But wait a second. You're saying that maybe Robert's, what did you say, antisocial rammy behavior? If we feed him a happy diet? No, he doesn't eat that stuff. It was me.
Happy diet.
So if I put myself on a totally non-GMO diet, which I've, since meeting you, what was it, a couple
years
ago? A couple of Health Freedom Expos
ago. Yeah. I mean, I have to be honest. I didn't know that much about it, but now, if anybody offers me GMO food, I just punch them once, hard, but in the arm.
Well, that's the general. That's
rule. What we got to do here.
I got to say that I have talked to many doctors who prescribe non-GMO diets to their patients, and I've talked to their patients, and people talk about losing weight, getting over skin problems, getting over migraines, improving gastrointestinal problems, and allergies, of course. But with them, it's hard because you don't know if it's the switching to organic or less processed foods, because that's sort of what you have to do.
It's a little of everything.
Yeah. But with the animals, I talked to one of the top veterinarians in the country, Dr. Michael Fox. He's written 40 books, has a syndicated column. He says it's unmistakable. When GMOs were introduced, animals started itching more, gastrointestinal problems, and then you have these people where they change. There's one guy that he switched to non-GM corn. His cows gave 20 pounds of milk more per cow per day, which is ridiculous. And so many people are talking about reproductive problems right now, and they're switching to non-GM corn and soy because they say that solves the reproductive problems on their farms and ranches.
Well, we figured out one mystery.
Which one?
We were on a GMO airplane.
That's it. That's why there was so much gas on that plane.
Gastrointestinal problems
Oh
among
my gosh,
everybody on the plane. And we should have just gotten up and said, listen, do you understand what you people are eating is killing us?
Yeah,
Us.
exactly. It is. It's desperately dangerous here. So GMOs, we want to reverse the trend, obviously. We talked about Connecticut and California for the listeners, because we got listeners all over the world, much less all over the United States, Jeffrey. Those of us in California, right, as we are now at the Health Freedom Expo recording this, or those listening in Connecticut, what do they do to make sure that their states become the lightning rods to change this thing?
Very good. So Connecticut's very simple. The bill is in the Environment Committee. Contact everyone in the Environment Committee on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, the next day you can, and call them and say, I'm in favor of your passing the bill out of committee, and then find your representatives online, your reps and your senators, and let them know you're in favor of GMO labeling. And with California, go to labelgmos.org, get trained to gather petition signatures, certainly sign it if you see it on the streets, and get involved. You see, right now, the entire world is being bullied by the United States. If you look at WikiLeaks and all the other indicators, we're the big bully on the block. If we can deflate the GMO status in the United States, we can turn the entire world around. If we can do it in California, we can turn the United States around. And it's simply a matter of passing this ballot initiative in November, and that's simply a matter of informing people and telling them the truth and giving them what they want to know. So it's an amazing opportunity that it's not common that someone can have such a positive impact on all future generations and all living beings in such a short time.
Like we can do now. Absolutely.
Is he saying that it's not Ahmadinejad who brought the GMOs to America? It was
I didn't say that. I don't know.
It was somebody. It was somebody inside of a corporation in the U.S.
Exactly. Yeah, an artificial creation of the state, of the government. Yeah, I know.
What is Bill O'Reilly going to do?
Well,
with
remember
this
Planet GMO, that lost episode of Star Trek. We got to reference to remember that.
We should replay that.
We definitely need to replay that. Jeffrey Smith, we appreciate you so
this
much.
Dude is, this Jeffrey Smith. You don't know. He's a one-man. I only discovered his work. Somebody mentioned I was just doing some printing the other day, getting some posters ready, and somebody saw some stuff on about your poster about gastro, and he goes, "Oh, you should read about GMOs. There's this guy you have to read. His name's Jeffrey Smith."
He brought it up to you.
I might have seen him before.
At the printer. Oh, look at you. We're reaching.
I had a button about GM-free Hawaii or something, and I was online for an airplane to go to Kauai, and someone taps me and says, "Oh yeah, there's a lecture tonight there. You may want to go to it." And he didn't realize I was giving a lecture.
Nice.
Sometimes it happens.
Well, tell me quickly, I know you got to run to the lecture and we got to get some more interviews here. Other websites we should always be reminded of.
Okay. So, responsibletechnology.org. That's kind of the hub of information. I just pour stuff in there. We've got videos for you to watch, audios for you to listen to, articles, and be a click and send revolutionary. Get the word out to your Facebook and to your email list. Then, so after responsibletechnology.org, you sign up for the Spilling the Beans newsletter. It's free. Then click on over to nongmoshoppingguide.com and save a life and a family and a community by figuring out how to avoid GMOs. Thousands of products listed are third-party verified as non-GMO. And seedsofdeception.com is going to have a facelift. I haven't actually said it on air in 3 years because I've been kind of embarrassed because I think the latest posting was in the early 18th century. But But what we're going to have
Hear ye.
Yes, exactly. Everything's in Old English or Latin. And so we're going to have a facelift there, and I'm going to be announcing a new film there very soon. In fact, Mike Adams is matching donations to help us get this film produced and promoted. So if you go on responsibletechnology.org, and you'll see an opportunity for you to make a donation where you will help drain Mike Adams' wallet in the direction of a non-GMO food supply.
Well, thank you to Mike Adams for that.
Thank you,
Take
Mike.
that, Mike.
Yay. Thank you, Jeffrey Smith. We'll check it out. All the links up at the blog today at robertscottbell.com, as they always are, in appreciation of all of Jeffrey's work. Big hugs to you and your wife. We're always glad to see you here.
Yeah, thank you.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.